Hey, Janine, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Woo! Coming in 5 by 5.
All right. Where are you? Are you still going to the party today? Oops, you froze.
This is totally safe, I promise.
I'm gonna just give it another minute. We will start at 6:35. I am not expecting this to be a big crowd tonight. So we are just missing Mar. Okay. Okay. Well, this is gonna give it
I
one
know
more
she's
minute.
on her way.
Okay, good. And Betty is finishing class, so she should be here shortly.
Markowitz here. Hello, Dr. Smith. It's been forever. And hello, Rich. I thought I saw the Highline staircase go by in the background.
Oh, that's one of my backgrounds. Yes, that's my.
Very nice.
Rich has the rotating
Nice. We
background.
know you're educated. Yeah, we know you're educated.
Depends on the topic. Yeah, depends on the topic. I got a few. I had this one. This one's a good one. Yeah.
Hi, Michael. How are you? Good to see you.
Oh, this is a good one.
Good to see you too. Oh, very nice.
I
gotta do something better than my live Kia while I'm driving feed.
No, be careful.
I'm impressed that you're driving.
Yeah, just be careful.
Well, it's not called Zoom for no reason.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just a few minutes ago, there was the WNYC interviewed the choreographer for Megan Thee Stallion, and he gave an over the radio way to warm up, and he's like, turn your head, but if you're driving, don't turn too much. It was great. So anyways, I think we are ready to start. Good evening. Welcome to the CB2 Schools and Education Committee meeting for November. We have 3 agenda items tonight. But before we do that, I want to introduce everyone that is on the call before we get into the meeting. Just going to go. My name is Janine Kiley. I chair the committee. Patricia. You're muted. Amy.
Hi.
Rich Cacapolo.
Hi.
Michael Markowitz in the car. Akila
everyone.
in the kitchen.
Hi, it's Booth Bourguignon tonight.
All right. Matt Metzger. Dr. Shirley Smith.
Good evening.
Donna Raftery. And our
Hello.
CB2 Chair Carter Booth. And we have a small group tonight. We have Pat Comerford with Speaker Johnson's office, Luke Wolf with Controller Scott Stringer, Cynthia DeLeon from Manhattan Youth, and she runs the program at 75 Morton. And then we have 2 other people on, Anita Pandian and Chavinana, who I'm not. Are you with any organizations? Just raise your hand if you want, otherwise we'll jump in. So we have a, let me move over to, we have a very brief agenda tonight. Well, not brief, we've just want to go over meeting protocol tonight before we start. Let me go here, sorry. Get my share screen. Probably not too much of an issue tonight, but our protocol is, be respectful to whoever is speaking. If you have a different view, ask a question or raise your hand. Attendees will be on mute until Q&A. We'll take Q&A after each topic, and then we'll go into business session. We have 3 agenda items tonight: extension of priority admissions for middle and high school students to students in both community school districts 1 and 2. The somewhat of a moot point, the DOE decision to not permit students to opt back into blended learning after winter, and expansion of Learning Bridges. That's the free childcare program for children from 3K through 8th grade on days when they are scheduled for remote learning. And I'm glad that we have Cynthia on the phone because she can talk to that a little bit as well. Oh, and we have Mar Fitzgerald on the call. He's just joined us. So I want to start with, I've shared with the committee some draft resolutions, and I just want to take this group through the concept of extending priority admissions for middle and high school students who live in community schools, live or attend school in community district 1, and giving that priority to schools in community school district 2. As background, in September, Community Education Council District 2 passed a very similar resolution to the one that I've shared with our committee. And the concept of this is basically advancing principles of racial and economic justice within our community. As many of you know, you only have to, particularly from if you live in Greenwich Village or Little Italy or Nolita or Soho, you're just a sort of 5 or 10 minute walk away from the boundary of school district 2 and entering into school district 1. And I'm going to just share a couple pictures as to really illustrate this. Let me find just a moment. Let me get the right slide up before I do that. I am going to share a picture of, for those of you who are not familiar with the boundaries, this is a map of school district 1 and 2. The blue is school district 2 and carved out in the East Village and part of the Lower East Side is school district 1. The northern part where it's orange, those areas, those students can attend local middle schools. They're able to attend District 2 middle schools, even though they're in District 1. And that's a wealthier area in Peter Stuyvesant and Peter Cooper Village. And in the purple areas, which is a lower income community on the Lower East Side, includes a number of NYCHA projects, NYCHA buildings. These students are allowed to attend school district 1 elementary schools, but not middle schools. So it's sort of this weird historic carve out that we are addressing. And the point of this resolution is that regardless of where you live, most people, particularly when their children are young, would like their children to prefer local elementary schools. In District 2, most of our elementary schools are zoned for a specific neighborhood. In District 1, it's a choice lottery system, but it's a much smaller geographic area. So the focus of this is really just at the middle and high school level. And I just want to share a couple more maps. Let me move over to the screen. These are in the resolution. I just screen. Sorry. Just a moment, technical difficulties. My computer has frozen. No. Okay, just a moment. This is a map. It's the same map, just zoomed in each time. This is a map of most of Manhattan, zoomed into Lower Manhattan. And then you can see in the East Village, the gray buildings are all NYCHA developments. And the differences here, I want to highlight, are understated because they reflect the demographics of District 1's elementary school borders. For middle and high school, whiter and wealthy sections of District 1 are moved into District 2. And as the previous map showed, the less white and poorer section of District 2 are moved into District 1. And then I just want to show a comparison of the demographics. Oops. So these are 2018, 2019 data. District 1 is about 20% of District 2, 6,900 students. District 2 is about 2,800, 20%, 80%. District 2 tends to be more Asian because it encompasses Chinatown, but significantly lower percentage Black and Hispanic. And the District 1 has a higher percentage of students living in poverty, 71%. That's pretty close to the city average, versus District 2 is a lower percentage of students living in poverty, still about a third of the students. So the demographics are fairly significant. And I just want to show, this is a map from the new Homeowners Loan Corporation risk map. These maps are online. You can look at any neighborhood in the entire nation from 1935 to 1940. The red line area, the red line shows, the red part shows where neighborhoods were viewed as hazardous to lend to. And it's almost a perfect overlap to School District 1 today. You'll note that parts of Community Board 2 were not even color coded because these were manufacturing areas. And what we're not entirely, parts of the West Village were declining. What's now considered the Gold Coast still had a B rating, and the South Village was also considered hazardous. I just want to put some historical perspective on that. At this point, I want to open it up to questions. We'll go first to committee members, then CB2 members, and then if the public has any questions, just use the raise your hand feature and you can ask them. Okay. Committee members? Rich?
What did you mean by hazardous?
Well, that was just reading that. I was reading the legend on the map.
Yeah.
Basically, I actually would have to Google to see what they meant by that, but that was basically don't lend to people who live in these communities.
Okay, yeah, it was just a definition. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at, for those of you who printed out a copy of the resolutions, the legend on the map, which is really tiny, the blue, the green areas, which the map I showed had none, was best. B was still desirable. C, which was yellow, was definitely declining. And D, which was red, hence the expression redlining, was hazardous. And that was the terms used by the Homeowners Loan Corporation.
I got it. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, sorry. Not hazardous today, back in 1935.
Yeah.
Assessor, so.
Yeah, terrible word.
I know it is a terrible word. And definitely declining is not good. So hazardous falls well below that. Okay. Anyone else have any comments or questions on this? Before we open it up. Matt, I see your hand up.
Just consistently well-researched, well-written resos coming from this group.
Okay.
Really well. And with regard to redlining, it was a very blatant. It wasn't hazardous in any material. It was just black. It was just absolutely racism codified, and was eventually changed by the Community Redevelopment Act. And I think that we need a CRA for education, and I think that this is one of the steps. So.
And I just want to give credit where credit is due. This is based off of the resolution that was drafted by Edward Irizarry, and he's now the president of School District 2, and Chad Marlowe, who lives in former member of Community Board 3 and parent in School District 1, and Naomi Pena, who is the president of School District 1, another parent leader. So we've just modified it for Community Board 2.
Chad also was previously on Community Board 2.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good history. Yeah. He's. Does anyone from the public have any questions or comments?
I had one comment I wanted to make, or one question. Yes, I really loved this when it came through CEC, and I support this resolution. I wanted to just say the one concern that has come up in discussions with people in the community, my kids go to school in District 1 and I live in District 2, is that, and the one thing to kind of keep an eye on is this presenting an option for parents, white parents with, means and access to, be able to take their kids out of District 1 and put them in District 2 schools? Are we really making the inroads into the communities of color to really make this opportunity and resolution be felt, across the board and equally within all of District 1 and District 2's communities of families?
I think that's a valid concern. Because whenever each middle school and each high school has its own method of getting in, and people who have the time to research those methods and target their applications to those rubrics are always going to be more successful. So that is going to favor people with time or money or both. So I think that really comes down to broader discussions that are, at the school board level, is how do we increase diversity across all of our schools? And I think that's an important issue, and perhaps we should add a clause in this, because I do think that's a valid concern. Or address that in another meeting. And we also have Betty Kubovi-Weiss joined us.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Sorry, I'm a little late.
No worries. Does anyone else have a comment or question about this? Oh, Dr. Smith? Yes.
Yes, I think the question that, hold on to get her name, that Akila asked is very important. And I think what it might even beg the question too about what is happening with the education, the integration, phase 1, phase 2, and now those two. I know District 1 is not, I think it's just District 2 and 3 that has the integration proposals or writing the grants I have written for phase 1 and 2. Might be interesting to sort of see where does the integration piece that the District 2 has at the school level, at the district level, where does that, how does your, I'm not sure if I'm asking the right question, but it seems like there might be some emphasis here for how does integration, at least what the district has proposed to integrate the schools, how will that affect, or will it affect the resolution in any kind of way?
Well, I should just share with everyone, I'm not sure how many people know this. So District 2 was awarded a New York State Integration Project grant of about $2.6 million, might be 2.5. It's a big chunk of money. The superintendent Donalda Chumley, who has led District 2, was announced that she's going to be taking a job as the chief operating officer for Connecticut school system. Don't know when she's starting. So I think critical to how that money is prioritized and spent will be who the next superintendent is for school district 2. I don't know if anyone has any more newer information to add to that.
Janine, might I also add that in speaking to some parents and some leaders, educational leaders in the district, of course, there's been lots of issues with the CEC around this whole process. And that there has been some issues of little to no community engagement of parents. And that, of course, is one of the guidelines requirements within the grants. Remember, I don't know, I think just for clarity and for disclosure, phase 1 note was not an RFP. It's my understanding that people in districts who were kind of in the know applied and of course got a little funding and then made it as what they call a design team. And then for phase 2, it was an RFP, and I understand that District 2 also got monies for the phase 2. However, what's interesting is that no report, no transparency, to my knowledge. I'm not in the CEC anymore, but parents have told me and other community leaders and concerned citizens is that that report has not been shared, not even with the CEC, let alone with the larger community. And that is, there are lots of issues about the lack of transparency as well as legitimacy. So I'm told I had a call with one of the high level people at Central asking some questions about it. And they are aware of the issues, they say, and they are going to be watching and looking very closely at what is happening in 2, and that report will be becoming available in 2. Now, what's interesting about 3, it is an RFP, but what's interesting about the RFP for 3 is that you cannot apply for 3 unless you were part of 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 was just what they call a planning grant. And 2 was the design teams of people in the district to get together to decide how they're going to integrate the schools and what their strategy and their plan is. And 3, of course, is the extra money that they're being given so that they can actually come up with a way of their strategy, their benchmarks and whatever. And the idea is to not only talk about what the strategy is for integrating the schools in the district, but also what it would look like in those target schools. I understand it's not every school, they have targeted schools. And if there's anybody on this call that I am misrepresenting the information, please feel free, to jump in. But there's a tremendous amount of concern about a lack of parent involvement, transparency, and these are public funds. And but they hopefully these issues will be addressed moving forward for the phase 3.
Dr. Smith, I think you pretty much summarized the history very accurately.
Thank you.
Mar, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Dr. Smith said. The process for the integration pilot was very problematic. There was zero transparency. There was not one Black or Latinx parent on the design team. All of the parent members are white. And this is an integration pilot. Additionally, I just sent the actual final plan to all of the committee members if you guys want to take a gander. We have it now after it was approved, but no information beyond a really short and unclear summary was shared prior to the approval.
I'm very glad to hear that, because maybe my speaking to people at Central might have gotten things moving.
Thank you for that advocacy.
But the idea is that all parents must be involved, and it must be transparent.
I also would like to add that there was no meaningful parent engagement prior to this. So hopefully going forward, they will do something to change that.
Yeah, there were, just to clarify, there was a meeting last February about disproportionality in District 2. And one professor came in and presented information, which we linked in a resolution we passed in June. And it basically said that Black students, Hispanic students, boys, students with disabilities, and students in temporary housing are disproportionately served by the schools in District 2, particularly the ones that screen admissions and so forth. And so that was a discussion group. And then there was a meeting about useful information about what School District 2 was doing in terms of some pilots, in terms of students learning to read, which is useful information, but really not related to an integration grant. And then due to time constraints, there was about 15 or 20 minutes of parent comment. But it was at no point was the proposed plan shared and or parent feedback solicited in any way, in any public or private way, through a public meeting or any other mechanism.
Also, Janine, that research, was that what Ferguson, Dr. Fergus's research you read?
Yes, Dr. Fergus.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Smith, did you have another comment, or is
no? I was just asking, was that Fergus's work?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Do we have any other comments or questions on this resolution? Anyone, any attendees like to comment on? Okay. Then we are going to move to the second agenda item, which is a somewhat moot point in the event that schools might close shortly. But in September, before schools opened, parents were told that they, at any time at the beginning of the school year, you chose between a blended program where your child would go to school part-time in school and part-time at home, or fully remote, and you were allowed to switch to fully remote at any time. And we're told at the end of the fall term, you could switch back from remote into blended, and that you would have another opportunity later in the school year. we understand that there are a lot of logistical hurdles with doing the schedules and constantly changing, but the chancellor surprised parents and they were given until Sunday night and they were told it's now or never. And meanwhile, many parents kind of wanted to wait out the winter, see how things are going, and if things look better in the spring, opt to have their children attend school part-time in person at that point. So the second resolution that we have on the table today is just a resolution to basically allow parents another opportunity to opt in the future in the event that schools remain open for the rest of the school year, and have an open enrollment in the spring when families may opt back into in-person learning if they so choose to do so. I don't know what people are hearing from friends and families and neighbors on this issue.
I wanted to jump in here and say that, many principals are actually are basically defying this and continue to offer their student body additional opportunities to opt into blended learning because they don't want the whole school to return to school at the highest COVID rates. As the rates are rising, they don't want parents to feel like they'll never get their kid into school if they don't choose it now. My children's public school are continuing to honor the February and April dates for changing, for being able to opt in from remote learning. And a lot of principals are not in support of this now or never approach.
I'm just writing. I would love, do you have those February and April dates? If I could get those from you, not now, but after the meeting, I think would be great. Betty, what's happening at your school?
Hunter's not been doing so well in terms of keeping COVID cases down. There were a couple in the kindergarten, and they sort of chalk that up to like it's hard to social distance from kindergartners, for especially like the teachers and the students. But then there were another couple of cases in the 10th grade. So they had to shut down the 9th and 10th graders are in a different building. They shut that down for cleaning. Juniors and seniors have been fully remote this whole time. And as of now, they haven't announced plans to make everyone else fully remote yet. But I think a lot of teachers and students are sort of expecting that might be coming.
Got it. Yeah, like I said, this is when we wrote it's a new world from when we wrote this agenda 3 weeks ago. Okay. But I think it's still relevant because whatever happens over the next couple of months, spring will come and late winter will come and spring will come and hopefully we'll have opportunities. Any other, Pat, I know that you're on the line. I don't know, what are you hearing? Are you hearing from your constituents about this? Sorry to put you on the spot, but if you don't want to, okay, well, I will, Pat, are you there?
Here I am, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
A couple, not a lot. We've heard from some, but
okay,
not, I'd say a handful. So
I think at this point, if somebody is 100% remote, they're not going to take, this is not their high priority to opt back in before Thanksgiving and Christmas breaks. Betty, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just, the New York Times morning briefing this morning was like talking about I don't know how exactly on topic this is, but was talking about how a lot of countries in Europe are taking the approach of closing businesses, specifically eating establishments as opposed to schools, and how America seems to be opting the other way and then also trending the other way in terms of COVID cases. Again, I don't want to like introduce a new resolution in this moment right now, but is there like perhaps a way in the future at like a next meeting, or maybe a way to amend one of the resolutions to sort of encourage that type of approach and like prioritize obviously safe in-person education over the what appears to be much more high risk indoor dining and, you know, bars being open, etc.
Okay. Well, I guess it's good that we have Donna on the call, who, I mean, and this is where we have different committees that are going to have different objectives. We have the economic development and the education committees. Donna, I don't know if this has come up in any of your conversations.
It hasn't really come up in any of our conversations. I think it's a valid point to make, but it hasn't come up in anything that we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
Because it's just not, you know, we're not dealing with the back and forth of either thing. We're dealing with the licenses that come before us, not whether, you know, I guess the reopening working group has been dealing with that more than just the SLA committee is dealing with that. And in my mind, it would come over the whole bucket of how they're looking, the city is looking at prioritizing reopening and closing things.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at the headlines today. One of them changed, but you know, the Wall Street Journal has New York City restaurants fret as temperatures turn colder. You know, and they're basically everyone, all of these businesses are teetering on the verge of bankruptcy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not good for them. I mean, I have my own personal opinions about it, which is separate from maybe the committee's personal opinions on it. But it's not good for any of the businesses. There was another article in the Times today saying that they don't expect the tourist industry to be back to where it was until 2025.
Yeah,
so,
that's a very bleak headline.
That's, yeah. So, you know, I mean, I looked at that and thought, well, on a positive note, the city may have to start rethinking how they do things and cater to the people that actually live here all the time. And the businesses, bars, restaurants, retails, all of that aren't just geared towards tourists. Might be a good thing if it, you know, and rents might have to reflect that and everything else, which is a whole separate conversation from who gets closed, schools, restaurants, bars, you know, all of that.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, you know, Rich has brought up some good points. I mean, that's the responsibility of our elected officials who are entrusted to listen to their public health officials as far as what to close and what not to close. It moves on such a quick basis that, you know, everything changes each week, that we can't really comment on something because it's moving so fast. And that's, you know, right now we see the governor, we see the mayor, and those are really the two officials on, you know, as far as we're concerned, that are making these decisions, whether we agree with them or not, or the conflicts, you know, those exist. But to throw in something now isn't as timely. You know, we don't know where things will be in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks, but they're not afraid of just pulling the plug, you know, and shutting stuff down. We've seen that, and I think it's particularly hard for restaurants because they're not equipped with their cost structure with their food to really close and open and close and open and close and open. That's a real challenge, and I think there's a little sensitivity to that.
Yeah. Matt, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like I've done this a couple times, Carter, so I'm very sorry, but I would strongly disagree with Carter. I think that, of course we can, you know, obviously everything's changing fast. That's life in 2020, we got to adapt. I don't think it's timely. I think we should have been saying months ago that it's unconscionable that we're going to keep restaurants open and not schools. How does that make any sense? How is indoor dining more of a social good than schools. It just does it doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's pretty obvious pandering by electeds towards business and away from those who desperately need their help.
The schools are on the schedule, and that's why that had to be decided so that people can plan, and that's a big difference from restaurants. I think that's what we heard right early on, is to plan what they're doing for the full semester, which is different than the businesses, which don't operate obviously on that type of a.
But aren't we on a day-to-day basis of deciding whether schools are going to be open or not?
Sorry.
The reality is, as a parent, I heard on Saturday that school would for sure be open on Monday. And I heard today that school's for sure going to be open today and tomorrow. And I don't really know what that means. My kid goes to school, one of my kids goes to school Monday, Tuesday, Friday. So I'm like, it gets 2 days in this week. So as a parent, it's extremely difficult to plan. And you see the anxiety from the kids who, obviously, if you looked at the data, anywhere from 25 to 50% of the students in New York City are actually attending school part-time. And, but those who are, in most cases, are getting a better product than they otherwise would be getting over a Zoom screen. And they're getting small group instruction, and they're getting some socialization, and it's great for my kid. And I completely understand families who are opting for 100% remote for a whole variety of reasons. But taking that away is really tough. And I just want to highlight that the part of the reason right now everybody's focused, New York Times had an article, are we at 3%? It's a 3% 7-day average, because that's the deal that the mayor and the chancellor and Mulgrew at the UFT agreed to. And so it's not, businesses don't have a union. Families don't have a union, students don't have a union, but teachers do. So I would, I'd like to, that's why we have the second resolution, giving families flexibility. And I kind of want to segue into our third resolution, and we can continue this discussion, but I know Cynthia De Leon, and I'm not sure if I'm saying your last name correctly, is on from Manhattan Youth. If schools close, right now, not-for-profit providers in the New York Parks Department are providing space and childcare and some support for students in 3K through 8th grade who need a place to go while their parents are working. And that's why at the last minute, even though we didn't have the full notice, I wanted to put together a draft resolution about expanding and continuing the Learning Bridges program, because we did hear from the mayor that no matter what happens with school, this program will continue. And I think with that, reading between the lines, that tells you the power of the union, because the people who work at these programs are not UFT, not part of the represented by the UFT. But right now, there's a long list of providers throughout the city. In our neighborhood, it's the Tony D'Appolito Center, the Chinatown Y, and McBurney Y. The Lower East Side, you have Grand Street Settlement, Henry Street Settlement. You have Manhattan Youth serving students in the Tribeca downtown area, and YMCA's all over the city is an example. So did we, Cynthia, I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about what you know about the programs Manhattan Youth is running.
Hey Janine, hi everyone. I'm not 100% positive. I live upstate, so I'm not much in the city at this point. I do know that we got notification from DYCD, who is funding the Learning Bridges program, that they will continue through, even if there is another lockdown, prioritizing those who are essential workers, and that might open up our original feed, I guess I would call it. Originally, when the Learning Bridges program came out and Manhattan Youth got the funding for it, our feed schools were in the Tribeca area. But if we do go into fully remote learning, Learning Bridges will stay open, and it will change what students are allowed to attend the Learning Bridges program across the city, I believe is what I understood from that email.
So by that, do you mean that you might get students whose families work in maybe the Civic Center area downtown?
That's what I understood from the email. It seems that they're shifting their gear if we do end up in a more where students are fully remote, that they would be gearing Learning Bridges to similar to the rec centers in the springtime.
Got it. The rec centers were regional enrichment centers. I think that's what the rec stood for. And those sites were not listed online, but that was where an essential worker could take their child for childcare while they needed to go to work during, I'm not sure what hours they offered, and I think each site varies. Cynthia, do you happen to know how many students Manhattan Youth is serving at its Warren Street location? And if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head their daily attendance rate, but I believe they got funding for 75 per day. And I think that number is based off spacing in the community center where we host the Learning Bridges.
Got it. Okay. Whoever's got the water running, if you could just mute yourself. Thank you. Okay, I see a bunch of hands raised. Michael Markowitz?
Hi, Janine. I wanted to talk a little bit about whether or not to keep schools open, but I'm not sure this is the right time in the meeting.
We'll come back to you. How's that?
That
Dr.
would be great.
If you have, I'm going to take questions on Learning Bridges first, since we have Cynthia on and I don't want to keep her. And then we'll go back to the other topic. Dr. Smith?
Yes. Hi, Cynthia. Let me ask you a question. Are you a provider? Or what exactly is your title as? Are you directly related to the Learning Bridges program? Are you a parent?
No, so I work for the CBO, the community-based organization that is running the Learning Bridges program in Tribeca.
And what's the name of it?
Manhattan Youth.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you share your email address with me in the chat?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And Dr. Smith, I have it as well. I can connect both of you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Janine will send it. Thank you, Cynthia.
Mar?
Hi. I believe that the Learning Bridges program already was short some huge number of seats. They already weren't able to serve the number of kids that they needed to, that needed care. So, excuse me. So if there's another shutdown, right, wouldn't gyms and rec centers, not the COVID rec centers, but like recreation centers where most of the Learning Bridges programs are being conducted, wouldn't they be shut down to adults anyway? Wouldn't that make more space for kids?
Well, I think
like the Y, for instance, right? The Y is operating in a limited capacity as a gym, but also has Learning Bridges inside it. If the adults were all gone, couldn't they use that space to accommodate more kids?
I would assume so. I mean, I haven't done this. Cynthia, Manhattan Youth, are you using the classrooms in the basement? I mean, Manhattan Youth has basically the pool and a bunch of classrooms. So I don't know if you guys would necessarily free up that much more space.
Yeah, from what I know, they're using the classrooms that are in the basement, and I think one upstairs on the second floor, and possibly the Great Hall. Like I said, I haven't been down in the city since July, I think. So I haven't been much at the community center. To maybe answer your question, Mark, I don't, theoretically, yes, it would free up physical space, but I don't know because of COVID regulations, whether or not they would open it up for more students. I'm not sure if the funding was based off of space in ideal conditions or if it was based off COVID regulations and social distancing and safely learning and all that.
Thank you. So if we want to expand learning bridges, do we know how they would?
I think it's a combination of space and funding. So theoretically, if the schools were closed, you might be able to use some of the school space, or you could use the gym space. But you know, at the, you know, each site receives funding, so it's a matter of expanding the funding for these programs to meet the demand, and possibly shuffling, finding more space in communities where there are more essential workers who qualify for, who are the priority users of these services.
Additionally, the learning bridges was only for kids who were in blended, right? So full remote kids couldn't use it at all. But if there's a whole city shut down, would that increase the demand or decrease the demand for the kids? I don't know.
Well, I would assume if you are a blended kid attending Learning Bridges 2 days a week and you go 100% remote, you might need it 5 days a week, depending on what your, you know, parent situation is.
And it's going to come on the heels of this new this November 15th opt-in. So there may be a whole bunch more kids.
Yeah, there might be more. So I mean, it's likely that there's going to be more demand, for sure. I mean, even if you just had the kids who are going a couple days a week, needing it more than a couple days a week, that alone will increase the demand. Dr. Smith?
No, I was just going to give a little history to the Learning Bridges. What happened is that, to my understanding, it was a shared thing with a set aside money from the DOE and NYC. And that was a limited amount of funding. The mayor at the beginning offered, he said that he would have by September 1st, the beginning of school, 100,000 seats. Well, of course, we were talking about, the last time I checked, which was like about 4 months ago, there were like 3,000 seats and change. And what happens is, just like you said, Janine, it has to do with funding. It also has to do with space. And of course, in some neighborhoods, of course, will have a more of a demand than others. It was, well, I don't know how well it was thought out, but the mayor, of course, did such an overreach, but it really is not at any point where it's being that really helpful to the level that it should be in neighborhoods where people need it the most.
Yeah. Okay. I know we have a couple parents on. I don't know if any of the people, if anyone here has used Learning Bridges, a Learning Bridges program. I've spoken to someone outside this call who used the McBurney Y location for their kindergarten child and found it, obviously it's childcare. It's not necessarily a lot of, you know, and then the kid comes home happy, which is the most important thing. Cynthia, are your programs full, mostly full? I mean, do you have a good feel for how full they are?
After school or the Learning Bridges?
The Learning Bridges.
The Learning Bridges, I want to say is not full, but like I said, it's being the feed programs, the feed schools that students were allowed to, I guess, enroll in the Learning Bridges at Manhattan Youth were a couple of schools in District 1 in Tribeca. I think it was just Tribeca, maybe the financial district as well, or Battery Park.
Yeah.
So, you know, those are more affluent communities that may not necessarily need it as much. So if they do open it up if we do go fully remote, then I think that it will be more full for sure.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments or things we should be following up on after this call? Because I know we don't have there isn't a lot of public data on these programs. Okay. I'm gonna, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know it was short notice.
You're welcome. No worries. I'm gonna go finish up dinner.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Okay. I'm gonna, at this point, we're gonna go into business session. We have Pat coming from Speaker Johnson's office and 2 members of the public. You are welcome to stay on the call or leave, your choice. But at this point, it'll just be Community Board 2 members discussing these resolutions. Michael, I'm going to go to you since you had a comment about schools closing.
Hi, fumbling with the buttons here. How am I doing?
You're good. You're back.
Okay, my general thought, and some of us exchanged emails about this earlier, is the school opening, closing on a yo-yo is not only disruptive to parents for sure, and I'm glad my kids are a little older than that, but it's not based on facts, data, or science. The numbers indicate that schools are quite safe for both children and teachers. So I don't understand the knee-jerk reaction to really skyrocketing COVID levels around the country, and some in New York, as relates to what to me is a pure, apologize, I don't mean any individual disrespect, a panic decision to close the schools. I'd like to see us as a society, maybe if it's appropriate for this committee to say, you know, we need CDC medical epidemiologist based approaches to whether we close schools as a system, individually, and the metric you cited earlier of I think it was a 3%, I forgot the technical term of art, spread rate is only one way to look at it. And again, respectfully to the other people I was exchanging emails with earlier today, the alternative to being in school for the kids is what? Safer, less safe? It all should go into the equation. And I just don't see our mayor or chancellor doing that and pulling in the right kind of medical and epidemiological experts to guide that decision. And it leaves parents totally whipsawed for nothing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. I know we have, I mean, I think the reality is, you know, I've heard different things about the school. The official numbers in terms of in-school infections is relatively low. I've heard nuances that some schools tell the families ahead of time when they're going to have surprise testing and so forth. My child has been tested once. I found out after the fact. So he was already at school. So I did not have the opportunity to take him out of school, but that's just one story. I don't know how that compares citywide. I do think the yo-yo part is really that our kids are under a lot of stress. Parents are under a lot of stress, but kids are under a lot of stress, and older kids have phones. And when you know, things started hitting the news last Wednesday and Thursday, that's the day, you know, my younger son is home, and I could hear the anxiety and the conversations he was having with his friends, and that's just what he's verbalizing. So it is really hard for kids not to know what's coming next. And I just want to say that for those of you who see in the chat, I know the attendees didn't see this. Pat Comerford shared a joint statement from Council Speaker Corey Johnson and Ed Chair Mark Traeger about prioritizing, basically doing everything we can to keep the schools open, and prioritizing in-person learning for younger students and our most vulnerable student populations. It talks about tough decisions that must be made and following the science, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, it does not say what those tough decisions might be, i.e. restaurants or other things. But thank you for sharing that. Is there any more, Akila? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to continue with this discussion because I think it is so important. And certainly I definitely feel like a yo-yo in this as a parent. It has been so difficult to, the city puts out a plan and then they decide, oh, they're going to change it. No, you can't opt in anymore these 2 days. It's now or nothing. Like they just, you know, change the ground underneath the feet of the families so many times. And the thing about it is that, you know, we do have more knowledge in science about transmission, but we do have children and adults in school buildings, adults that teach together, children that, you know, come in school together, adults that are in meetings together. There's all kinds of interactions that happen in a school building for all age of people in the population. But the thing is, though, is that we have a system that can keep everyone safe and keep kids in school. You know, just to be transparent, I have 2 children in public school and 1 child in private school. And my child, who's a 5th grader in private school, attends school every day. And the school has dealt with, you know, adult to adult interaction within the school building, you know, using all the technologies that the public school uses, Zoom and all kinds of things for a teacher to come into the classroom remotely, but also to reduce transmission that happens within school. And then at the same time, they do testing every week, once a week, for every human being in the building. And we have not had a single case of COVID, but everyone has been able to get all the information that they need to stay safe. And also knowing that children under 10 are much less likely to transmit COVID, we could have a situation where all of the elementary school kids are at least able to attend school daily and have a blended model or an abbreviated version of school for middle school and high school kids, because we know that their rate of transmission is much higher. And it's not that it's safe. It's not entirely safe to go to school every day without having a plan in place for detecting and containing a COVID case. And we do have the ability to detect and contain COVID. My kid's school was tested one time since opening, public school. The public school was tested once since opening. 9 children were in the sample and 15 teachers were in the sample. That is not a comprehensive testing program when you test a school once with 9 students and 15 teachers without, and especially since we know you can catch COVID the very next hour after you take the test. So, you know, really what we need to have in place is a comprehensive plan so that our children can be in school and all the adults in the children's lives can remain safe. And that's, you know, I really think we need to think this question of priorities. What are the priorities of the city? Are we going to prioritize the children and the future people in the city to get an education and become citizens? Are we going to put our resources to that? Because that is what we're facing here, a situation where they've already demonstrated, and I've done some research on this and actually spoke to a psychologist earlier today. I had a conference call saying that in August, after doing testing on kids who've been out of school, there has been an 8-month lag in sort of their academic achievement. 8-month lag in August when they were testing kids to see where they are falling academically. And that from August until November, that delay, that lag has only increased dramatically. And you want to talk about kids of color, you want to talk about kids with special learning needs, that's even greater than 8 months. So, you know, the problem here is not that we don't have the tools to do this, to have kids under 10 in school every day, kids older than 10 in a blended model with everyone staying safe. We don't have the will to do it. That is what I have detected in this system, and it is tragic. It is just absolutely tragic. that this is happening right now, perpetrating against the future of this city, which is every kid in this city. So it's 2 words more than.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, to say the least. The question is, where can we push on this? I mean, we've passed resolutions about, I'm just thinking things that we haven't covered. We haven't really passed, I mean, this gets to tricky stuff in terms of, keeping the schools open, you have 10 different people, 10 different opinions. I do know that whatever happens, when the schools are not open, schools are losing learning, and that's probably one thing that we can all agree on.
I also want to say that they're only testing 10 to 15%. They're supposed to be testing 10 to 15%. They're only testing 10 to 15% of the students who are in the blended learning. They're not testing 10 to 15% of the total population of the schools. So if you think like every classroom has approximately anywhere between 8 and 10 students in each classroom, right? Each classroom holds about 8 to 10 students, whereas before they were holding 30 students. They're only testing 10% of the 8 to 10 students that are currently in the classroom. So this data set, and I've tracked it. I actually emailed everyone right before the meeting the COVID tracker, where you can type in the name of any school and find out their test results. I track it for a bunch of different schools. And most schools have been tested one time since the beginning of the year. So this data set is meaningless in terms of if they're actually able to get accurate rates of COVID in the community. It's so infrequent and the sample size is so small to reliably give you data points on what the COVID rates are. So that's another big problem with this data set.
Okay. Matt, you had a comment?
I was going to second everything Akila said on her first comment in terms of like priorities of the city, and I don't know. I would like us to take a position, but I defer to obviously the group and you as chair. But I think it's important for us to say that these should be the priorities of the city. Education comes before indoor dining. If it's safe enough to eat inside, it's safe enough to teach kids, is I guess my point. But there are massive gaps in this data set. So in your inbox, I pulled down all the COVID data for every school in Manhattan, and then also cross-referenced it with kind of demographic data. And you have that in an Excel. There are huge gaps. Don't get me wrong, but it's a good start. Let's encourage them to test more. Let's really push on that. I think that makes it a safer place. Surveillance testing is hard. Don't get me wrong, but let's try. Let's try to be a little bit better. I'm okay with just testing the people who are in the schools. That's whoever is going to get sick at the school, that's I think we should be testing. But I don't know. I do think we should take a position. And I think that this is a good start, but we should push where we can.
Okay, Mar, and then Rich.
Honestly, I don't trust the data. I don't think that there's any way that it could possibly be accurate unless they mandate that anyone who wants to walk into a school building opts in for testing, and that they test at the recommended 50 to 60% of the population of those buildings. Otherwise, the data doesn't mean anything.
Okay, well, if your child attends school, you need to opt in for testing. If you choose not to opt in for testing and your child gets selected, they are sent home. At least that's what I've been told. I have opted in for testing and my child's been tested once. And I know another cohort was tested on another day. So the school's been tested twice. So that's my
But
experience.
if you're only testing at 10% at some schools,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to catch those people. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You can't catch everybody.
No, you can't.
Unless you're testing everybody.
And other schools are doing, private schools
That
are
should
doing
be
that.
cool. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Rich, you have a comment?
Just, can we have more perspective from or more of the teacher's perspective?
No. Amy.
I mean, are people afraid? Are teachers afraid? I mean, I think they've got a whole different set of responsibilities now in terms of how to manage the different,
Yeah. I mean,
class
the
segments.
teachers who are really afraid are not working at school.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, there's already some self-selection there. And I know from seeing a bunch of teachers in front of the school, it seemed that, it skewed very young. So the old, Betty?
Yeah, I can just say this is like mostly from the experience of my school in particular, but a lot of teachers, there was a big sort of like with the union movement to not return to school. And I think that every time that, again, as a new case has been found, at least in our school community, that pushback has grown even larger. I'd agree with Janine's assessment that the younger teachers are more willing to go in, but a lot of older teachers have taken like a semester of Travia, sort of like a first step towards retirement because they just don't feel comfortable going into school. So I do think that teachers are generally pretty concerned, especially as cases are rising in the schools and in the city when, again, as everyone's been saying, when testing methods within the schools are just entirely insufficient.
Akila?
I wanted to add to that, since my husband is a public school teacher and I get to hear his staff meetings quite often. There is a lot of distrust of the city to actually protect anybody, teachers, students, families. I think that the teachers feel as though they're insisting on, sorry, I have background noise. I have a lot of loud children here. But I think some of the teachers really feel like pushing the city on this is helping to protect everybody, because the city really should be testing more. They should be doing what they can do, what they have the means to do, and they're not doing it. So I think in some ways, joining with the teachers and pushing back on the DOE and say, no, you must increase testing in our schools. You must increase your contact tracing programs and all of these things, because, like my husband as a teacher, he's supposed to get a quick turnaround time for COVID tests. He's not getting that. And so even though they'll say, oh, teachers are going to have priority, he still has to wait 42 to 72 hours for his results. So, I think there's a lot of mistrust of the city, of DOE people to really put, walk the walk, I don't know how the expression, you know what I mean, but to do what they're supposed to do to protect everybody.
Let me make a suggestion, and then I'd like to go to the resolutions and come back. We did not have this on our agenda as discussion in terms of, increased testing, increased contact tracing, quick turnaround, prioritized schools. Perhaps we could agree to write a letter, could bring it to exec tomorrow or full board and send it. That's one suggestion. Carter, would that work within how we operate?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a
or could we pass a resolution that says some version of that? But maybe it's just a simple.
I mean, you can introduce the resolution at the full board meeting.
Got it.
The question is this something that the public would have wanted to opine on, number one, and number two, is there a reason that we have to do it right now? So
yeah,
you know, without not having that criteria of a reason to do it, kind of doesn't give us a, you know, a very clear justification.
Yeah.
Not that we couldn't, but it's difficult to explain that to somebody. Why didn't I know about this and couldn't comment?
Exactly.
Um,
Okay, so let's
There's
move
also,
on.
you know, just to point out also, I mean, right, it's like everything's moving and we're in sort of another swing moment as well. And, you know, that's generates some confusion too, right? You know, as we're in flux with numbers,
Yes.
and whatever we do, it's going to be different next week.
Okay. Yeah, it will be. It might be different on Wednesday.
Yeah,
For all we know.
Did the governor said that he would tolerate higher numbers before?
The governor always said 9%. The deal with the UFT is 3%.
Got
And
it.
as of recently as something I read a couple hours ago, Mulgrew was still firm on that 3%. I'm not sure what's happening behind the scenes in terms of negotiations, but you know, it's the agreement with the union that is holding the mayor at 3%.
Yeah, I mean, your guys' discussion, you know, and just sort of Matt's comments before, it's definitely compelling to really think about it. It's more the mechanism for the change, right? It's of
Yeah, the mechanism for the change is that all of these deals were negotiated before schools started, and you know, and they were negotiated in late September. Schools have started. The people who are actually attending school in person are greatly benefiting from it. You know, people are still nervous, but you know, for those who are in school, they are enjoying the experience.
I also want to just comment in terms of the percentage rates. So they are arbitrary to a certain degree. We should have a lower percentage rate than the state, just because we are more densely populated and our hospitals will be overrun and, you know, underwater if our percentage rate, our cutoff rate is not low enough. So we do, I mean, that's something though that I don't know who, I'm hoping it's like scientists who chose a 3% number and not politicians. I don't know, but I do understand that statistically we should have a lower percentage rate than the state because of the density, and you also want the percentage rate to come well underneath your facilities and your supplies, you know, being taxed.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that number was decided on.
I don't know how it was
also
decided.
if these
I think it was
spikes,
somewhat
if
political.
spikes start moving really fast,
Yeah.
the lag, you know, to close is what, you know, people catching it's like just to realize, I mean, yeah, from city public policy perspective, you know, you want to be on the front of this, not on the back.
Yeah, and you can also see, you can go on the COVID tracker. You know, the West Village is like 2.25%. It's higher, and you know, Battery Park City is under 1%. And some parts of the city are much higher. I want to move us back on track. We have 3 resolutions, and I want to specifically quickly just the first resolution is extending priority admissions for middle school and high schools to students from School District 1 and School District 2. Does anyone have any more discussion on that resolution? Okay, I'd like to take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, is that an aye? Okay, and any opposition? Any nay? Any recuses? Okay.
I wanted to just see if we could add on there, you know, the idea that I was talking about earlier about, you know, emphasizing that this is about integration and diversity, and not kind of like a white flight from District 1 to District 2, and maybe working towards creating a plan that can, where that can be the result, where it can be about integrating and diversifying our school system.
I would like to do that separately.
Okay.
And something that maybe in a future meeting that more broadly addresses these issues, and the NYSET plan and so forth. Because I know that there's a lot of supporters for this resolution as it is, and I think both of these are important concepts, but I don't want to dilute one or the other.
Yeah, and I think if we have an opportunity to do it separately, we can actually maybe think through ways that can
perhaps
be.
we would just tie it into the NYSET, how the NYSET money is going to be spent.
Oh, yes, and that too. $3 million will help.
Tonight, because we did not have that on the agenda.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. The second resolution is to support additional opportunities for families to opt into in-person learning in the spring, as originally promised. Any further discussion on that resolution?
I would ask that we just say at least one more chance. That I don't know. It sounded.
At least one additional open enrollment period when families may opt in. I'm good with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, can't we just hold them to what they said they were going to do? I mean, why should we give?
Because it's really hard to open a school and not know how many people are going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it. I mean, right now there's a trimester system essentially. So in terms of the school year, so that would mirror it as well. I think at least one is fine.
Hey, Matt, would you be okay with the language at a minimum one? At a minimum one, just to be really clear.
I'm okay with that. At a minimum of one additional open enrollment period this spring when families opt into in-person learning. Welcome, Keen.
Thank you. My other is over. Happy to come.
Okay.
Hi, Keen.
Hi. I much prefer being with you guys in case
Cool
you.
what you're doing though. That's cool.
Okay. We are in the second of three resolutions. So with Matt's suggestion, at a minimum of one additional open enrollment period this spring, everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No. Okay, unanimous. And the final resolution, which is not finalized as much, it's a resolution to expand learning bridges. I would like to get a little more data if I can in here, but I would support getting some data in here and some version of support expanding funding and identifying additional spaces for providing learning bridges and rec programs for students in, for public school students. And I'd be happy to send sort of finalized language around to everyone.
Okay.
Does that sound something that along the lines of what we would support? Because if schools close, schools actually might also be sites for this as well. Okay. So I think that, Keen, you joined us at the end. We had a long discussion about how accurate the COVID testing is in school.
Yeah, I saw on it.
There's a lot, verbally as well as I am just catching up to seeing those emails. But I think the general consensus is people would like to see more testing, more contact tracing, and quicker turnaround for teachers. But we did not have that as a resolution for tonight. So, honestly, we could send a letter, but I think it's really reaching out to our elected officials as well as, and putting a pressure on them. Perhaps we have three options. It's always the do nothing. We could write a letter, basically high level, saying we really need you guys to push on this. Or we could draft a resolution that we would introduce at the full board meeting on Thursday night. But as Carter notes, this is moving pretty quickly. Patricia, you look like you're really contemplating this.
No. I think the resolution, we should introduce it at full board, because then you have the community there to chime in. That's what I think, since it's moving pretty fast.
The community wouldn't be able to chime in because they wouldn't know about it.
No,
It would be just the letter then.
Okay. Okay.
Can we just put it on the, can we also put it on the agenda for next time? Even though I obviously strongly support, I don't love the idea of doing stuff without, notice.
I would like to do it for next time, but I'm just gonna pivot to something that's desperately needed by parents is number of parent right now, as you know, the city has typically what happens is by early the first week of December, parents apply to public middle and public high schools. And then you find out the high schools, you find out in mid-February, March, and the middle schools you find out later in the spring. Right now, really nothing's happening. And parents are frustrated because all they know is that the dates that are usually in place are not going to happen. And the DOE has not shared new dates, even if they're like, applications will be due February 15th, or frankly, they'd be probably better off just picking a date far enough out that they know they can meet it and sticking with it, but they've not done that. So parents are operating in an information vacuum and do not have, some schools are doing remote tours, which are okay, depends on the schools. And some schools are doing nothing. So several parents had suggested that we do some kind of high school forum with students. The goal being information that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get from a website or from a tour, and from informal polling of parents, ideally would be something like a student panel, sort of building on what Betty did last month. Anyway, so then I know that 75 Morton would welcome that. Just gonna see if I can get that.
Are you talking about high schools or middle schools, Janine?
High schools.
We're doing both.
No, just high schools. And the reason being the rationale for, and we would probably, I haven't reached out to anyone else. Here, can you see my screen now? These are my notes. Because 75 Morton families at 75 Morton, which is in our district, really could benefit from this. So the thinking would be that we would look at get students from D2 priority high schools, which there are, Quest should be on this, and then D1 and through 3, 6 through 12 schools, other popular screen schools downtown, other local schools downtown, but not specialized high schools, not transfer high schools, because the target audience is 8th graders, transfer high schools target older students, and not career and technical schools. And looking at what's unique about the curriculum, what was appealing to the students, how remote learning is going, and how does the school create community. And so I know that's probably less interesting to a lot of the people here, but I've heard from several parents that would be really helpful, and we could probably get a huge percentage of 8th grade families at 75 Morton. And frankly, from what I've heard at many schools is that the guidance counselors, everybody at the schools are basically focusing on teaching. Because now, since every school has been split into 30-person classes, have been split into small cohorts, it's sort of all hands on deck for teaching. And I think students, sort of the guidance counselor action is happening. The guidance counselor support is less than it would typically be.
Sounds like a good idea to me. Because we're supposed to be helping the community make decisions. And if the community really wants this and needs it, we should do it, right?
Yeah, I second that.
No.
I third that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, parents, from my knowledge, parents applying to middle school, I mean, just as we should do high school, definitely I agree doing high school, but they're not getting any information at all about the application process. They know nothing. So the anxiety level is really quite high if you're, you know, applying to middle school or you're getting no information. I mean, the city hasn't even decided on admissions procedures because of this too. So the city is they're not making any decisions.
yeah, they're not even making decisions people don't like. They're making no decisions, which is really frustrating, which is the worst case scenario. I mean, if this is successful, we could potentially do something like this for middle schools as well. But I was thinking because 75 Morton is in Community Board 2, and PS41 did a middle school panel.
We have it on Thursday.
Oh, it's doing one. So I don't know what PS3 and PS130 are doing. Versus the high schools, it's sort of a broader draw. And so there's less is happening. So that was sort of why I thought we would prioritize the high school side.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
So that would be, I haven't heard from Trinity, so they would probably reach out to them come in January. So if we did another agenda-like topic, we would have to either do it before or after. We'd have to figure out how to squeeze it in. That's my only concern. The tentative date, our regular meeting date in December is Monday, December 14th.
Janine, did we vote on the last reso?
Oh, we didn't because I was going to send around some revised language.
Okay.
But it sounds, so in addition to a high school panel, other things that we want to talk about is sort of broader integration issues, how that NYCET money is, what the plan is, getting parent feedback on it, and having it really impact integration, since it is an integration grant. Did I miss any? And then we'll look at some kind of letter for exec. Anything else? Okay. Public members, I know attendees, I know there's 4 of you still there, so I want to say thank you for sticking with us. Join us for our next meeting. And committee members and CB2 members, thank you. And have a good evening.
Thank you, Janine.
Okay.
Thanks for preparing those.
Thanks, Janine.
Good night.
Thank you. Super great meeting. Thank you.